They don't actually want you thinking clearly. Because if you did, even for 10 honest seconds, you'd stop doing half the things that make you easy to control. You wouldn't say yes because you're scared of being disliked. You wouldn't stay quiet just to be polite. You wouldn't chase goals that secretly don't belong to you. You wouldn't crave approval from people who would quietly enjoy seeing you fail. Most of all, you wouldn't keep making decisions that sabotage your own advantage. That's why people are trained to confuse movement with meaning and emotion with truth. But Machiavelli didn't live in that fog. He operated with something brutal and rare: clarity. If you learn to think the way he did, your decisions get sharper. Every dumb mistake you don't make compounds into power you keep. That's where we start. The problem isn't that people don't think, it's that they think in the wrong direction. Most people run this pattern on autopilot. Feel first, justify later. They feel insulted, then build a story about why they have to strike back. They feel anxious, then convince themselves there's a huge threat. They feel attracted, then invent virtues to rationalize the obsession. The emotion hits first. The explanation arrives second. So if your emotions are miscalibrated, your logic is already doomed. You're doing smart thinking on top of a crooked foundation. Machiavelli flips this completely. He doesn't start with the emotion. He starts with the outcome. What do I want? What must I protect? What must I avoid losing? Only after that does he allow emotion into the room. And even then, emotions are not in charge. They're on a leash. From that comes the first rule of clear thinking. Separate what's useful from what's just true. Not everything that's true is useful, and not everything that's useful is 100% pure, clean truth. If you obsess over some perfect, absolute truth, you forget something. Decisions are not about reality in the abstract. They're about outcome. Machiavelli understood that's why he said it's more important to appear virtuous than to actually be so. Not because he worshipped deception, but because he knew a hard fact. People don't react to reality. They react to what they believe. So if you want to think clearly, stop demanding certainty. Start demanding clarity of consequence. Ask yourself, if I believe this, where does it lead? If I act on this idea, what position does it put me in? When you do that, weak ideas collapse under their own weight. But clarity isn't just about rejecting lies. It's about resisting overload. Today, clear thinking is less about finding more information and more about guarding your mental perimeter. Most people suffer from what you could call mental saturation. They believe more input equals better decisions, so they drown themselves in videos, threads, podcasts, hot takes, opinions, discourse, outrage, drama. By the time they're supposed to decide, they're paralyzed, full of fragments of other people's thoughts and empty of their own. Machiavelli would call that what it is: intellectual dependency. You don't trust your own judgment, so you borrow everyone else's. But here's the brutal truth. Every extra voice you allow into your mind makes your own whisper harder to hear. Lose that signal, and you'll chase goals you don't even value. So the second Machiavellian rule of clarity is: filter ruthlessly, reflect selectively. Before you consume something, ask 2 questions. 1. Does this source have skin in the game? 2. Will this information change my next action? If the answer to both is no, ignore it. Clear thinkers don't need more data. They need sharper filters. Once you sharpen those filters, your decision-making shifts. You notice something. Most people confuse options with opportunities. They think available means valuable. It doesn't. The world is full of easy options designed to keep you tame, jobs that pay just enough to stop you building your own thing, relationships that comfort you just enough to stop you growing, Distractions that numb you just enough to make clarity feel painful. A clear thinker doesn't chase what's available. They pursue what's aligned. Now, here's where most cloudy thinkers fall apart. They think they're being open-minded, but they're actually just indecisive. Open-mindedness means you evaluate multiple ideas. Indecisiveness means you're scared to commit to any. The world praises this disguised weakness. Don't judge too soon. Stay neutral. Keep all your options open. Machiavelli would laugh at that. He knew neutrality is often just fear in costume. If you want to protect your power, you have to make decisions before you feel 100% comfortable. Why? Because perfect clarity almost never comes before movement. It arrives through movement. You step forward. You see what resists. Then you adjust. So the third Machiavellian principle: clarity is iterative, not instantaneous. People who wait to be sure before they act get devoured by those who act, then refine. Machiavelli wasn't always right, but he was always decisive. That's what made him dangerous. Still, even a sharp mind can be hijacked by something stronger than logic: urgency. Most people don't lose because they think poorly. They lose because their timing is hijacked. When you're rushed, clarity dissolves. That's why so many power plays happen under fake deadlines. Sign this now. Decide today. Respond immediately. Urgency is just manipulation on fast forward. Machiavelli advised rulers to create urgency for others, but never bow to it himself. So, how do you stay clear when the clock is screaming? You build a delay reflex. When you feel pressure, don't ask, "What should I do?" Ask, "Who benefits if I act fast?" That one question pulls you out of the frame and puts you above the game. If urgency is their weapon, delay becomes your shield. Now flip it. Clarity isn't just about what you avoid. It's about what you calculate. One of Machiavelli's most underrated mental tools is contrast. Not just, what could this action gain, but what could it cost, and can I survive that cost? Most people only look at the praise, the money, the excitement. Machiavellian clarity demands the opposite first. What's the worst this could realistically do to me if it fails? And more importantly, could I recover? That doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you prepared. The most dangerous minds aren't gamblers. They're calculated predators. They don't just think, "What could I win?" They think, "What can I survive losing?" That's the core of clear thinking. Not just right decisions, resilient ones. And you can only make those if you're brutally honest with yourself. Not noble, not positive honest. That's where most clarity dies. Because people don't want honest decisions. They want beautiful ones. They want to feel like the hero even if it quietly destroys their leverage. Machiavelli didn't care if a decision looked pure. He cared if it worked. A decision that leaves you powerless isn't moral. It's suicidal. So if you really want to think clearly, ask yourself before any major decision, am I doing this to feel good or to protect my power? Because a lot of noble choices are traps. And a lot of choices that look selfish are actually the ones that safeguard your freedom. Thinking clearly isn't about intelligence. It's about loyalty to your own advantage. Every time you betray that advantage to be liked, approved of, or admired, your clarity gets dimmer, your decisions get weaker, and the cost compounds silently. But there is a way out. A set of practices Machiavelli would have used to build internal clarity so sharp nothing external could distort it. And it starts with protecting the architecture of your own mind. Here's the truth. Most people's clarity is destroyed by one thing: noise. Constant, invasive, dopamine-drenched noise. That noise rewires the brain. It distorts thinking. It shifts priorities without your permission. Your mind stops being a fortress. It becomes a hallway any idea can walk in, sit down, rearrange your furniture, and leave you wondering why your decisions feel cloudy. Machiavelli would have called this mental vulnerability. No strategist goes into battle with an exposed mind. So, how do you harden yours? You start by eliminating what he would have called mental saboteurs, tiny invisible forces that drain decision-making power before you even enter the arena. The deadliest of all saboteurs? Constant context switching. Every time you jump from app to app, video to video, tab to tab, you splinter your attention. You weaken your focus. You turn your clarity into dust. People think they're multitasking. They're actually self-fragmenting, and fragmented minds don't make strong decisions. They make reactive ones. That's why the sharpest thinkers don't just manage their time, they manage their state. They guard their mental environment the same way a king guards a throne room. Think about it. You wouldn't draft a war strategy in the middle of a chaotic marketplace. So why do people make life-changing decisions in the middle of notifications, noise, and emotional turbulence? Machiavelli would laugh at the modern mind, scrolling for clarity, tapping for purpose, consuming information and wondering why they feel hollow. Clarity isn't found in motion. It's found in deliberate stillness, not loneliness, strategic solitude. Because when you're alone, not sad, not isolated, but intentionally alone, you can finally hear your own mind again. You become sensitive to your values. You remember what decisions feel like when they come from the inside outward, not from social pressure or imitation. This is where Machiavellian thinking becomes powerful. It's the ability to create internal silence even while the world is screaming. But silence alone isn't enough. Once you clear the field, you must build on it. And the first building block is the simplest, and the one most people skip. What am I optimizing for? Not what do I want? Not what feels right? Not what do people expect? But what is my mind designed to achieve? Most people never define this. Their decisions feel chaotic because their aims are undefined. One day they chase peace, next day status, next day affection, next day revenge. Their mind is at war with itself, and they call it being open. But clarity demands hierarchy. You can't serve 10 gods. You pick one goal, the one that sits above the rest, and prune everything that doesn't feed it. Machiavelli didn't fantasize about ideal outcomes. He worked within terrain, what was possible given his position, leverage, and constraints. He didn't ask, what's perfect? He asked, what's possible and what's tactical? Real clarity doesn't come from imagining your dream scenario. It comes from mastering your actual one. So ask yourself, are my decisions based on where I wish I was or where I actually stand? Because most bad decisions come from faulty assumptions, not faulty logic. People assume, I have more time. They're more loyal than they are. I have more leverage than I really do. And when the assumption collapses, their clarity collapses with it. Machiavelli would warn, self-delusion is the enemy of clarity. It's easy to see lies in others. It's brutally hard to spot them in yourself. Your mind protects your illusions like sacred artifacts. You'll overlook red flags, exaggerate your strengths, believe effort guarantees reward. You'll cling to stories that keep you comfortable, even if they cost you power. That's why one of the highest forms of clear thinking is self-disillusionment, removing the comforting story, facing what's left without flinching. Because once you do that, your decisions stop being hopeful. They become tactical. You stop reacting to how you wish the world was. You start responding to how it actually operates. And that's where things get dangerous in the best way. Because when you can operate from this grounded state, people start thinking you're prophetic. They think you have a sixth sense. But you don't. You've just stripped away the mental fog that blinds everyone else. Emotional reactivity, over-attachment, false urgency, social mimicry. Your mind becomes a weapon. You stop thinking about what feels right and start thinking about what moves the game forward. You stop caring about approval and start tracking leverage. The moment your decisions optimize for leverage, clarity becomes addictive. You stop asking, "Is this right?" and start asking, "Does this strengthen my position?" And once you start operating from that frame, something fundamental shifts in the way you see the board and the way the board reacts to you. Once your thinking starts optimizing for leverage, everything changes. You stop fearing discomfort. You stop negotiating with your feelings. You stop chasing validation. This isn't heartlessness, it's honesty. Because when you look back at every bad decision you've made, every toxic relationship you stayed in, every opportunity you let rot, every yes you regret, it always came from the same place, thinking with emotion instead of leverage. Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't in cruelty, it was in clarity. He saw the world as it actually functioned, not as people moralized it. And when everyone else is operating in fog, the clean lens becomes the most powerful one in the room. But there's a tactic almost nobody talks about, something subtle but devastatingly effective. A strategy Machiavelli used instinctively: reversal simulation. Before making a major decision, he didn't just ask, "What happens if I choose this?" He also asked, "What happens if I don't? What happens if I stay silent? If I walk away? If I forgive? If I tolerate this one more time?" Most people only analyze action. Almost no one analyzes inaction. And yet, some of the most destructive consequences in life don't come from bold moves. They come from quiet indecisions, from staying where you shouldn't, from waiting when you should have acted, from tolerating what was rotting you. So next time you're stuck, don't just run the scenario forward. Run it in reverse. Ask, what starts decaying if I do nothing? That question alone can reveal a truth people spend years avoiding. And once you embrace it, you step into a level of clarity most people are too scared to reach. Because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't make you look good. But it makes you dangerous. Let's go even deeper. There is a mental switch Machiavelli used that made his clarity not just sharp, but predictive. He seemed to know what others would do before they knew themselves. Not because he could read minds, but because he understood a painful truth. People are far more predictable than they think. Once you've cleaned your own mind, you can start reading those who haven't done the same, and that gives you an enormous advantage. Most people aren't making choices. They're reacting to patterns they don't see. Fear patterns, pride patterns, validation patterns, approval patterns. Machiavelli studied these patterns ruthlessly. He mapped out people's insecurities. He anticipated how ego would hijack their judgment. And with that, he could predict reactions with stunning accuracy. Not perfectly, but consistently enough to stay one step ahead. You can do the same. Start watching what drives people's decisions. Are they terrified of looking weak? Are they trying to prove something? Are they bored and calling it ambition? Are they wounded and calling it principle? If you identify the underlying force, their next move becomes obvious. Before any negotiation, don't just ask, "What is my leverage?" Ask, "What do they fear I might do?" You don't even have to say the threat. Just knowing it shifts your presence. It changes your tone, your posture, your timing, your silence. And suddenly, without announcing anything, you're guiding outcomes. This isn't manipulation for cruelty. It's clarity applied to real-world dynamics. The more accurately you can forecast people, the less they can hurt you. You stop being shocked when they betray you. You stop being surprised when they ghost, lie, or panic. Not because you're cynical, but because you understand the game. Players don't cry during the game. But there is a cost to this clarity. A cost most people never pay. Intellectual loneliness. When your mind becomes sharper, you pause when others rush. You walk away when others cling. You see dynamics no one else notices. You make cuts others are afraid to make. And sometimes it feels like you're the only sane one in a room full of emotional chaos. That's the price of clarity. If you don't accept that cost, you'll sabotage your own thinking. You'll soften your insights to stay liked. You'll mute your instincts to stay comfortable. You'll pretend not to see what you see to stay relatable. But Machiavelli would say, better to be misunderstood with power than understood and powerless. You must decide, do I want to be clear or do I want to be agreed with? Because those two rarely overlap, and something strange happens as your clarity sharpens. Your moves get quieter. You don't announce plans. You don't over-explain choices. You don't justify yourself to anyone. Why? Because clarity gives you patience. You already know the outcome. You're just waiting for everyone else to catch up. That's a dangerous kind of composure, the cold kind. And it's the kind Machiavelli respected most. But there's a deeper skill beneath this composure. One almost nobody masters. Mental layering. The ability to hold multiple interpretations simultaneously without crashing into confusion. A layered thinker sees not just what's happening, but what it looks like is happening, how others will misread it. What reactions those misreads will create and how to use those reactions as leverage. This is strategic thinking. This is leadership. And this is what allows you to navigate chaos without drowning in it. For example, someone criticizes you publicly. Most people react instantly. Defend, argue, spiral. A layered thinker pauses and asks, why now? Who benefits from this? What does my silence signal? What reaction strengthens my position in the long run? Often, the move that looks weak short-term builds power long-term. That's the Machiavellian advantage. Not winning the moment, owning the momentum. But let's get into the hardest part of all. The part that destroys most people before they ever reach real clarity. Your ego. You cannot think clearly if every decision threatens your identity. If every disagreement feels personal. If every correction feels like an attack. Because then you're not thinking logically, you're thinking defensively. You'll twist facts to protect your pride. You'll ignore reality to protect the story you tell about yourself. You'll cling to bad decisions because changing direction feels like losing. Machiavelli didn't make this mistake. He didn't tie his self-worth to being right. He tied it to being effective. He could pivot. He could reverse course. He could form new alliances. He could abandon old ones. Not because he was weak, but because he wasn't defending a fragile ego. He was moving pieces on a board. That's the clarity you need. Not humility, but adaptability. Most people would rather lose while being right than win by adjusting. That's not clarity. That's vanity. But here's the payoff. The more you practice clear thinking, the more free you become. Free from overthinking, from approval addiction, from regret, from paralysis, from the need to be perfect. Clear thinking doesn't guarantee that you'll choose right every time. It guarantees you'll know why you chose. And that alone compounds into a kind of power people can't touch. But there is one more Machiavellian technique, one very few people ever use. The strategy that turns your clarity from good to untouchable. It's called perspective reversal. Most people, when trying to understand someone else's perspective, just imagine how that person feels. That's empathy, and it has its use. But Machiavellian perspective reversal is not about empathy. It's about strategy. It means thinking from the perspective of someone who would benefit the most from your failure, and using that perspective to bulletproof your decisions. Ask yourself often, If someone wanted me to fail, what would they want me to do right now? Instantly, your brain switches modes. You start noticing emotional bait, convenient narratives, false urgency, ego traps, manipulation, frames, psychological pressure points. Suddenly, the scene looks different. Say someone offers you a too-good-to-be-true opportunity. You feel flattered, excited, honored, but then you reverse it. If someone wanted to manipulate me, what would they hope I believe right now? That I'm special. That I don't have time to think. That I can't say no. That I need them. Just like that, the fog lifts. You see the bait. You regain your leverage. This is the Machiavellian gift. Not just to think clearly from your perspective, but to think clearly from the adversarial perspective. From the predator's point of view. Because if you can map out how someone else wants you to think, you break out of their frame completely. And that right there, that mental freedom, is the core of real clarity. But clarity only works if you're willing to ask the brutal questions. Most people can't. Because clear thinking isn't gentle, it's not soothing, it's not meant to make you feel safe. It's a spotlight aimed directly at your own nonsense. If you flinch every time that spotlight exposes something uncomfortable, you will automatically drift back to comforting delusions. So here are some Machiavellian clarity questions, the kind he would have asked himself before any major move. Am I doing this because it's smart, or because it's easy? Am I protecting my future or protecting my image? Who benefits if I fail to act? What am I afraid to admit is already true? If someone smarter watched me right now, what would they laugh at? You won't like the answers. That's how you know they matter. Because the path to power is paved with moments most people avoid. Moments that demand ego death, brutal honesty, and uncomfortable awareness. Once you stop running from these questions, a shift happens. Your emotions stop hijacking your decisions. Not because you suppress them, but because you see through them. You recognize when your anger is being baited, when your desire is being exploited, when your fear is being manufactured. And the moment you see the mechanism, you become immune to it. This is why Machiavelli advised rulers not only to study virtues, but to study vices. Not to glorify immorality, but to understand how power actually behaves. If you don't understand how greed works, you'll be blindsided by it. If you don't understand cowardice, you'll mistake it for wisdom. If you don't understand your own capacity for deception, you'll never recognize it when others deceive you. Clear thinking isn't moral superiority. It's functional understanding. And once you think this way, every conversation becomes a map. Every conflict becomes a clue. Every mistake becomes a blueprint. You stop reacting to life. You begin dissecting it. But there is one trap you must avoid. Clarity without action. This is where most smart people fail. They analyze. They overthink, they perfect, they refine, they philosophize, but they don't move. They want every variable solved before taking the first step. That's not clarity. That's paralysis disguised as intelligence. Machiavelli didn't do this. He thought clearly, and he moved decisively, even when the outcome was uncertain. Because clarity isn't knowing everything. It's knowing enough to act. And even if you're wrong from a clean mind, and that means you can recover. It's unclear thinkers who collapse under pressure. Clear thinkers recalibrate. But clarity isn't just an internal skill, it's also environmental. Your surroundings either sharpen your decisions or smother them. If your environment is chaotic, your mind will mirror it. If your room is cluttered, your thinking will be too. If your circle is full of confused people, your confidence will erode every time you try to act. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He surrounded himself not with comfort, not with flattery, but with thinkers, with challengers, with people who forced him to refine his ideas. Because clear thought grows under friction, not softness. So look around your life and ask, who gets uncomfortable when you speak with clarity? Who pressures you to hurry? Who mocks your silence? Who benefits from your confusion? These are the people and environments that drain your clarity before you even begin to think. And if you want a strategic mind, you must distance yourself from anything that thrives on your fog. Clarity needs altitude, space, stillness, distance from noise. Once you create that space, something shifts. You stop asking for advice from people you secretly don't respect. You stop fearing mistakes because your mind knows it can fix them. You stop trying to predict everything because your internal compass finally points somewhere concrete. And slowly, without a dramatic announcement, you become a different type of person. The kind who doesn't need to justify their decisions because they weren't made for approval. They were made for advantage. But there's one final Machiavellian insight, one that ties everything together and turns clarity into a lifelong weapon: strategic integration. Most people separate their experiences into two piles: the good stuff they use and the bad stuff they try to forget. Machiavelli didn't. He understood that the worst events in life, betrayals, humiliations, failures, carry the most valuable intelligence. Pain exposes patterns success hides. So instead of erasing painful moments, he absorbed them. If he was betrayed, he didn't ask, "Why did this happen to me?" He asked, "What signal did I ignore? What incentive did I underestimate? What blind spot did they exploit?" That's not emotional processing. That's upgrading your internal model. Or when a plan failed, he didn't collapse or spiral. He mapped it. Was the timing wrong? Did he misread leverage? Did ego interfere? Did he act too late or too soon? Failure wasn't a dead end. It was data. This is what creates a mind that becomes anti-fragile. A mind that gets sharper under pressure instead of duller. Clarity doesn't grow in isolation. It grows in confrontation. You don't sharpen a blade by hiding it. You sharpen it by running it against resistance. The same is true for your thinking. Revisit the moments you said yes when you should have said no. The people you let back in after they proved who they were. The opportunities you hesitated on because you didn't feel ready. That pain, when examined with a cold lens, becomes clarity. It embeds itself as instinct, and slowly, your decision-making becomes coded with an intelligence most people never develop. It's the intelligence Machiavelli built through exile, betrayal, political warfare, and constant psychological pressure. A hardened clarity. A clarity that's portable, dependable, untouchable. And once you integrate your losses instead of hiding them, your entire presence changes. Your words get fewer but heavier. Your pauses longer but sharper. Your yes becomes rare. Your no becomes immediate. People won't be able to explain why you feel different, but they'll sense it. Because clarity changes your energy long before it changes your results. You walk differently when you know your decisions weren't made to impress, they were made to win. And here's the final truth. A man who does not govern his own mind will be governed by the minds of others. So build a mind no one else can quietly control. Think without emotional noise. Decide without borrowed opinions. Act without needing applause. Because once your mind becomes your own, every decision afterward is just a quiet confirmation of victory already earned. In the end, thinking clearly isn't about being smarter than everyone else. It's about finally taking ownership of your inner world. When your choices come from clarity instead of fear, urgency, or approval, you become impossible to manipulate. You stop reacting and start directing. You stop surviving and start strategizing. And the moment your mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a command center, Life stops happening to you and starts happening because of you. Remember this: clarity isn't a gift. It's a discipline. Sharpen it daily, guard it fiercely, and use it ruthlessly. Because once your mind becomes truly yours, every move you make becomes a move no one sees coming.